everyone. Welcome to Biotop Aquarium Project, or simply BAP, and our second open webinar. For those who are not familiar with BAP, just a short information. BAP is an international platform 100% dedicated to the research of the aquatic environments and the inhabitants, and to divulgation of the Biotop Aquarium concept. The curation based on such an aquatic research. The BAP offers a freemium-based content, which means some of it is free access and other can be accessed on the subscription basis. We invite you to visit Biotop Aquarium Project website and especially our section articles. You will find loads of unique contents that will help you to understand and to recreate hundreds of biotopes. Once again, welcome our dear participants, and let's give a warm welcome to our special guests tonight, Lawrence Kent, and welcome Michael Sauter, who will be our host.
Thank you, Amanda.
Very nice, Amanda. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So tonight, my name's Michael Zelder. I'm going to be your host, and I'll be doing some interviewing tonight. And tonight we have Lawrence Kent as our keynote speaker for November. And we are very happy to have him here. This is a presentation that he previously gave for the American Cichlid Association. It's entitled Seeking Friends and Holy Grail Fish Stories from Mauritania and Nigeria. Okay, and this is going to cover his 2019 trip to Mauritania and to Nigeria. He's found encountered some very interesting biotopes and fish there with all sorts of interesting fish like mormyrids, cichlids, and many other types of fish, catfish. And basically, Lawrence works for a humanitarian organization that mainly works in Africa and South Asia and travels frequently abroad for his job. During these trips, he takes advantage of the locations to seek out freshwater fish on the side. So he's made presentations and collected fish in 23 countries, published 24 articles in Tropical Fish Hobbyist, Amazonas, the Cichlid News, I'm going to say this wrong, Buntbarsch Bulletin, and the German magazines DATS and BSSW Report. Okay, so he currently serves as an associate editor for Amazonas magazine, the US edition, and as a judge in the North American category of the Biotope Aquarium Contest. Lawrence keeps 27 tanks at home with African cichlids, Southeast Asian labyrinths, and self-collected native fish. So big welcome to you, Lawrence Kent. We're very glad to have you here today.
Hey, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Amanda. I'll try to share my screen and see if we can get started.
Great. So I'll be taking questions from participants as we go, or Lawrence, would you prefer to wait until the presentation is finished, or can I ask during? What's your preference here?
I've got a pause in the middle, and maybe we'll use that to take questions on the first half.
Okay.
And then we'll switch over to the second half.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, but if there's anything pressing, yeah, feel free to jump in, Michael, and thanks again for agreeing to moderate this. So welcome everybody. Very glad that you're willing to pull out a little bit of time from your day to hear something about these trips to West Africa. And I'm going to talk, as Michael said, about two places that I've visited in the last year or so, I guess about a year and a half so. One of them is the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, and the other one is Nigeria in West Africa. So let me start with Nigeria. All right, there it is on the map. You see it on the Gulf of Guinea on the Atlantic side of Africa. It's a very populous country. There's 186 million people approximately living in Nigeria. That's a lot of people. And in 30 years, in the year 2050, they estimate that there'll be actually over 400 million people living in Nigeria. And believe it or not, at that point, Nigeria will be the third most populous country in the world after India and China. There will be more people in Nigeria than there are in the United States of America. So it is a very important country as we move forward. Unfortunately, about 47% of the population does remain in poverty. So it is a country that unfortunately does suffer from a lot of difficulties. Here's another map of the country, and one of the reasons that Nigeria struggled and had problems with poverty is that it also has been a place of, unfortunately, of significant conflict. And in the late 1960s, early 1970s, there was a civil war in Nigeria. And the Biafra area, that's inhabited mostly by the Igbo people, decided they wanted to break off and create a separate country, which led to a very terrible civil war, a blockade that led to a famine that killed between 1 and 2 million people. A real disaster. Eventually, the federal government did win that war, and now that part of Nigeria remains part of Nigeria. Another big problem in Nigeria is the ISIS-affiliated terrorist group in the north, Boko Haram. Boko Haram means book learning is forbidden, and this is an extremist movement that has led to the deaths of tens of thousands of people and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people in the north, and it's a conflict that unfortunately still festers in the northern part of Nigeria. And then down here in the delta, down where you see Port Harcourt, right there on the Bight of Biafra, there's a lot of problem with the Niger rebels. And these are rebel groups that operate in that part of the country that have caused a lot of havoc and made it a very dangerous place to go. When you first see that photograph, you might think that is a tropical fish collecting expedition that's just gotten a little bit too enthusiastic. But if you look more closely, you realize those are actually a group of Niger Delta rebels that continue to plague that part of the country and unfortunately are very active in kidnapping. For this reason, most international travel organizations recommend against travel to Nigeria because unfortunately it is quite a dangerous place at times. Violent crime, armed robbery, assault, carjacking, kidnapping are unfortunately too common in Nigeria, and kidnapping of foreigners unfortunately is part of the fabric there. So when one travels to Nigeria, one has to be careful. And because of this reputation and these problems, even though it's such a huge country with so many beautiful and great things in it, very few foreigners visit it because of these travel advisories and other difficulties in getting through Nigeria. You see some of this when you even when you first arrive, but there are reasons to go too. And one of them is the friendly people, and the other one is they're very friendly fish that make it a great destination for those of us who are interested in freshwater fish diversity. So here's the capital, Abuja, and when you fly into Abuja, you come into an airport that often is quite chaotic. And this particular time when I arrived, there was a major fist fight that had broken out between passengers who were angry that their luggage had not arrived. And it's kind of the fun of Nigeria. There's always kind of a lot of chaos, and it can be disconcerting, but it also can be somewhat joyous. It's a country that's full of life and humor and strong personalities, and I've grown to love it very much. I travel to Nigeria at least once or twice a year for the last, I'd say, 15 years, and I've really grown to love the place. Now, as Michael said at the beginning, the topic of this talk originally was about Holy Grail fish and trying to find Holy Grail fish. And that was actually sort of the prompt that was given to us when we were making these presentations at the American Cichlid Association about 1.5 years ago. And so I started thinking about, well, Holy Grail fish. I mean, one of the most common Holy Grail fish, of course, is the silver arowana. A lot of people consider that their Holy Grail fish, particularly Asian people really seem to adore this particular species of dragonfish. But being that I'm more focused on Africa than I am on Asia, I decided my Holy Grail fish would be the African arowana, Herodotus niloticus, which is an amazing snake-like fish as well. And that's something that I've always dreamed about trying to find, catch, and photograph in Africa. And it's not so easy to find it. So it became sort of the quest, and that was my search for the Herodotus niloticus. All over West Africa, I've looked for it, including in Nigeria. So last year on my trip to Nigeria, I took an extra leg, and that was a trip. I flew into Abuja, the capital, and then worked my way down here to Makurdi. the Benue River in the state of Benue, an area not many foreigners go to. But you could see the Benue is a river that comes in from Cameroon and then converges with the Niger River and then works its way down to the Delta. It's an interesting big African river. When you fly into Abuja, it looks something like this. Here's the main mosque in Abuja, and then you start driving down to Benue. Unfortunately, Nigeria has a lot of pollution. When you have a lot of people and a lot of chaos, you wind up with a lot of pollution. And as you drive along the roads, you'll see sites like this that can be a little bit discouraging. If you look closely at this sign, you can see that dumping of refuse here is prohibited. And if you look a little bit more closely, you can see luckily urinating on the refuse is not prohibited. So that person is just moving forward with that action. Nigerians are very resourceful. I noticed as we were driving down to Benue, this other car, it was just a station wagon driving next to us with 3 men in the front seat and 2 full-size live steers in the back seat. They had managed to put 2 full-size cows in the back seat of their car. You can see it there, just driving down the road with 2 big steers in the back of their car. Once you get out in the countryside, you begin to see the beauty of Nigeria. This is a field of cassava. Cassava is a root crop known in Latin America as yucca, in Francophone countries as manioc. It's the second most important source of food in Nigeria, and that's what a cassava field looks like. It's the root below the surface that is the source of food. And you begin to see some of the herders and the livestock raisers that live amongst the agriculturalists in the rural parts of Nigeria, and it is quite beautiful. Unfortunately, in Benue, you also have this problem too. It's a newer problem that's arisen over the last, I'd say, 6 or 7 years. And that's that the herdsmen have increasingly become armed. They've obtained a lot of automatic weapons through the Boko Haram movement in the north. And these herdsmen, mostly of the Fulani tribe, often are in armed conflict with the farmers. And that has led to, unfortunately, to a lot of violence and over 10,000 deaths in Nigeria over the last few years. And it's a big problem in Benue State in particular, where we were driving on that day. It's one of the reasons that we always take an armed guard with us. These are special police that are assigned to travel with us when we travel in Nigeria. And basically their job is to make sure that we don't get kidnapped. You know, even in the hotel we stayed in Makurdi, interesting, just to walk from my little bungalow room in the hotel to the breakfast room, they would send over a guard with a riot gun and an AK just to walk across the courtyard so I could get my my eggs and orange juice. When you get out into the countryside, people are super friendly. These are the Tiv people. That's the major tribe in the Benue area. And they were kind enough to give me some of their local tribal garments and welcome me very much as we worked on our agricultural projects in that part of Nigeria, helping the farmers improve the productivity of their cassava farms. Finally, we got to the Benue River, and you can see it's a pretty big river. That's the bridge that crosses it at Makurdi, and it was time to start looking for some fish. So as you know, the best way to find fish is to find fishermen and ask them, where are the fish? And that's what we did. We went down there and started talking to local fishermen and looking at some of their fresh catch. Like this friendly guy was happy to show us this African giraffe cat, the Auchenoglanis occidentalis. As some of you know, it's a really handsome giraffe sort of pattern fish. Unfortunately, it gets quite big and eventually is not a good fit for the aquarium. There is a dwarf species that goes by the same name, African giraffe cat, that stays in a more reasonable size. And now is actually being sold by some of the better fish dealers like the Wet Spot, for example, in Portland, Oregon, here on the West Coast. Cool catfish were also there amongst the fishermen in the Benue River, like this Bagris dokmak, a species that you can find actually throughout West Africa. And this Synodontis species, this is one you don't really see very often. I've never seen it for sale in the trade, Melanopterus. And here you've got kind of a yellow or golden version of that squeaker cat. And this, actually, this cat was squeaking quite a lot as he was being held in my hand. He didn't like being there and wanted to get back into the water with those kids who were swimming in the background. Another really cool fish, I consider that, is this spiny fish. Excuse me, spiny cat. I'm going to move this out of the way. Chrysictis oratus, the golden spiny catfish. This purportedly is a very good, actually, aquarium species. I've heard that from my friend Lex in the Netherlands, although I've never kept it myself. But I particularly like this picture because this kid in the background is kind of freaking out with his friends, having a good time in the water, just like this fish wishes it was doing as well. That's Cristictis auratus. This is an unusual mormyrid. This is one you really don't find very often. In fact, this is the only time I've ever seen this fish in my many, many years of traveling in Africa. The macrophthalmus, which is one of course, the weakly electric elephant fish or mormyrids that have the ability to emit electric pulses from their caudal peduncle in order to communicate with their kind. This is one of the elephant fish, Mormyrius macrophthalmus, that we were able to obtain there in the Benue River. Well, once we moved away from the big river, we started driving through, doing some of our work, but when we saw a puddle here and there, we would stop and take a look because we always wanted to see if we could find additional species of Nigerian fish. And sometimes we'd find a pond like this one. We'd head down there with our nets and see what we could grab, always being guarded by some of our diligent Nigerian policeman friends. And sometimes those guys were useful, not just in guarding, but they actually would help us bag up some of the more interesting species of fish. In this case, I think it was a cichlid that we caught there. Oh, here's a little aside story I wanted to tell you. Because when you're dealing with police in Nigeria, they have a reputation sometimes of being a little bit corrupt and problematic, but basically I've had good experiences there so far. I can't say the same thing for my collecting experience in North Carolina. This is a couple of years ago, collecting for some native fish here in the United States down in North Carolina. And here we're using the seine, trying to catch some beautiful fish like this fiery black cyprinid. But then quickly we were arrested by the police for trespassing. And here they are writing up our citation. They turned out to be friendly policemen. They allowed us to take our picture with them, but then they did give us citations, and we asked if we could just pay a fine, and they said, no, you have to go to trial, which was a bit of a surprise. Eventually, we had to hire lawyers to get us out of that mess. So policemen can be tricky for aquarists all around the world, but if you maintain a good sense of humor, usually you can find your way forward. Back to Nigeria. This is a smaller tributary coming off of the Benue River in Benue State. This is called the Mu. It's actually more of a stream, but there, myself and my friends, we went out there and started using our nets. We're using the famous Perfect Dip net that's sold by my friend Mark Brinkley out of Jonah Aquatics in Ohio. I always have a couple of those with me, and sometimes I leave them behind with my friends, so they're ready when I come back. And there we're able to catch some interesting things like this Petrocephalus. This is Sudanensis. It's got that black and silver. It looks like sort of like the American Las Vegas Raiders football colors. I have not seen this species in the hobby, but I wish it was available because I think it really is a beauty. Petrocephalus sudanensis. This is another mormyrid there, Pollymirus isidori. This one is available in the hobby. I have kept this in groups. Unfortunately, it's got such a friendly little face. It looks like almost like what's that? Like a Pokemon or something like that. Really friendly fish, but if you have them in a small, if your tank is not big enough, these things actually are vicious and they kill each other. I did bring back a bunch of these, and then sort of one by one, they killed each other off until I was down to a single one. This one's a bit unusual in terms of its coloration. Those spots are not the typical coloration of Isidore, which is more frequently just a plain gray. Like this one here on the right, the plain Isidore. And then you've got the Sudanensis on the left there. This guy, he just bumped into us down there. He was a local guy. He was quite drunk that morning, but also quite friendly. And when he saw me throwing my cast net, he was like, "Oh man, you don't know what you're doing." And he came over and took my cast net and started showing me his netting skills, which was great because he was able to come up with some pretty good fish, like these African tetras, these elestids, Brycinus imberi. I think it's a pretty cool looking species. Again, I've never seen it for sale in the hobby. In the States, it maybe becomes available through Glasser or some other great importers in Europe, but I've never seen it, but I would like to keep it. I was not able to get these fish back home, but I think it's a great kind of open water swimming tetra that would look really good in a community West African tank. Here's another mormyrid that we netted in the Mu there. This is Marcusenius, probably senegalensis. We can't be sure of that. And I think it's a really cool electric elephant fish. It's kind of got that big lower lip, which reminds me of like Gomer Pyle or Jim Neighbors in terms of its facial features. A wonderful African elephant fish. You know, we didn't have much time because I had to get back to work. And what I really wanted to find in this particular area was killifish. And the habitat looked really good for killifish. And there were these flooded grassy areas. But we had no time. I remember the guy I was working with. We actually were saying we only have an hour left. So we started actually running between different ponds and dip netting them and seining them, seeing if we could come up with something good. And finally in this location, after testing various flood areas, we were able to come up with something pretty good. And that looked something like this. Yeah, we caught some interesting tetras and then several species of killifish. This being one of the better ones, Epiplatus bifasciatus. These were able to get these back to the States. And you can see this male is quite a handsome little killifish that we've been successful in spawning in yard mops. Another beautiful killifish that we caught in that group is the Epiplatus spilurgyraeus. And this one is easily identified by those forward slashes along its flanks. Those diagonal bands are a bit unusual and they are distinctive for this particular Epiplatus species. Again, easy to breed once you get it back into the appropriate conditions in a nice tank. Okay, we ran out of time. I completed my mission in Benue, and so it's time to head back to Abuja, the capital. But along the way, we decided to stop to get something to eat. And we stopped at a local restaurant along the road here. It was called King and Queen's Restaurant, home of pounded yam and bushmeats. Now, yam is a very popular food in Nigeria, and bushmeats, Nigerians like it when they can get it. In this particular restaurant, we noticed that they were selling smoked dried pangolin, bush rats, and many other disgusting things that were available. That's my colleague, Godwin, trying to negotiate the price of a smoked pangolin. Interesting, this is sort of how they display all the different options at the restaurant. You can see there are varanus monitor lizards in there, some snakes, rabbits, bush rats, and grass cutters, pangolin, quite an assortment. You know, and I posted this picture on Facebook, and I got some very good reactions. I wanted to share some of those with you. For example, this person wrote back, "Dessert cart looks great." And this person said, "Can I see the vegetarian menu, please?" Ginny Cantoris wrote, "I'm really all not that hungry." And this friend wrote, "I see all the meat groups are represented." Pete says, "Is the hand on the left also on the menu?" I'll pause for a second so you can see that hand on the left. It wasn't on the menu. And Ted Judy, who many of you know, said, "I suggest the Ebola parfait." And I think this last one might have been my favorite comment, which was, "Check the Yelp reviews." Yes, King and Queen's is a wonderful bush meat restaurant that you'll have to check out next time you're on the road to Benue. All right, that was Benue State, but now I want to tell you about a different state in Nigeria that I visit almost on an annual basis, and that's Oyo State. And so to get to Oyo State, you fly into Lagos, the largest city in Africa, and from there you drive your way up to Ibadan, which is another very large city in Nigeria and in Africa overall. And that's where I go to visit an agricultural research station that my organization funds to try to develop more climate smart, resilient, higher yielding, and more nutritious varieties of crops. So as you work your way up the road, you pass people who are traveling with their cattle, a big cattle market along the road. And unfortunately, a lot of that pollution that I talked about earlier is evident. This is my bodyguard who travels with me from the airport up to Ibadan. This guy is tough as nails and has been involved in a lot of violent confrontations with kidnappers and others. And I'll tell you something more about kidnapping in a little bit. until eventually we get to IITA, the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture. It's a wonderful international center that is breeding and developing improved, more productive crops for African farmers. Oh, Michael, we're getting a little background noise, I think, from the shuffling papers. Once you get onto IIT's campus, you realize you're out of the city. You're in a fenced-off area that has sort of been protected from the encroachment of urban life. And there you've got these agricultural research fields. This one is testing new varieties of cassava, and you actually have a forest that's quite beautiful. It's also a good place because automatic weapons are not allowed on this campus, and they're also careful about disease control, like Ebola, that's been sporadically a problem in Nigeria. They also have a cafeteria with delicious treats like this assorted meat stew. So you can be well nourished while you're visiting the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture. And typically when I go there, I stay for 1 or 2 weeks. Well, the campus is beautiful there. It has some small lakes on it and some ponds. And when I'm not working early in the morning or on a Sunday, I love to go out and take a look in those ponds and see what we can find in terms of fish. And I also love to do bird watching. It's a really beautiful place. But remember this, the African arowana, that was my holy grail fish. And so I can't forget to be keeping my eyes open for that and seeing if I can find this wonderful large species. Well, this was probably not the right place to be looking for the African arowana, but these little streams often have some beautiful little fish in them, and often they have beautiful little birds in them too, like this kingfisher. There are beautiful birds all over this campus. But there you can find some great little cichlids, like this Chromatolapia guntheri, for example, guntheri, the original species. This, I think, is a female, which has that beautiful iridescence in its dorsal fin. You know, not super spectacular looking fish, but those of you who have kept this species at home, and I think many of us have, know that it's cool because it's a paternal mouth brooder, where the father or the male actually keeps the brood in his mouth and then releases them and protects them. And then the female it's kind of a reversal of roles because she patrols the area around where the fry are, fending off any predators. And they're a wonderful aquarium species. They spawn readily in a community aquarium. And I highly recommend them to anybody who hasn't had a chance to try Chromatolapia guntheri. There's plenty of barbs there too, like the Centauromius calopteris, a clipper barb. Those are abundant there in Nigeria. And also you can find jewel cichlids, like this little guy. Look a little closer. This is a hemichromis. And we've been trying to figure out what species it is. I actually have taken several fin clippings and preserved them and then sent them to Freihof in Germany, who sequenced them and said that they were a great match for Leternoxy from species that he had collected, I think, up in Egypt, where Leternoxy definitely exists. And Leternoxy is also known in the Sahelian region, and Ibadan sort of on the edge of the Sahelian region of Africa. So it's a chance that it's that species. That's what Paul Loisel told me. But others, like Anton Lampo, I said, no, that's a Guttatus. So it's a little bit hard to tell. And then recently I saw a presentation by Paul Loisel that he gave to the New England Cichlid Association, where he said there seems to have been some integration between the genetics of Leternoxy and Guttatus, and potentially this is one of those fish. Hard to tell, but a pretty fish. And when you get it home to your tank in Seattle or wherever you live, it spawns readily and produces many, many fry. I think there are thousands of specimens of this fish now that all come from the Leternoxy or Guttatus that originated in Ibadan, Nigeria. Oh, again, beautiful birds there. You know, the bird watching is great with binoculars, but some forest species are almost impossible to see because they live in the dense forest and the dense brush. I have a friend there who's a researcher who actually puts up mist nets once a year to collect and codify the bird species of the bush. And I happened to be there the last time he was doing such mist netting, which is fantastic. You put these little skimpy nets up in the forest, and then you go away for a half hour, come back, and you find the birds stuck in the nets. You take them out, he takes all their vital statistics, measures them, and we photograph them and then release them like this red-cheeked wattle-eye. We saw so many cool species of birds that you would never be able to see without having the possibility to use the mist netting technique. Yeah, that's that forest behind the lake there. And again, it's a great setting. Yeah, one of the cichlids that's pretty abundant there is Coptodon zeeli. Here you can see a breeding pair. You might not be able to see, but there's probably several hundred fry there that are swimming between the male and the female there, and they're guarding their group. That's just a picture I took from above a puddle right near one of the irrigation canals. This is what that zeeli looks like. You can see sometimes it can really light up with a nice red. You can even see a little blue band coming out of the corner of the fish's mouth there. This is a particularly pretty specimen of Coptodon zeeli. I think here I have a little, yeah, this is just a little video. When I was walking by the pond, I noticed right on the edge of the pond that there was a spawning pit, and in it there was a pair of these zeeli. And I wasn't really prepared, so I just took my cell phone, my Samsung Galaxy cell phone, which I know is waterproof now, at least for a few feet, and I stuck it directly in the water, put it right in their nest, and the zeeli weren't even afraid of it. And so I got a little shot, not the best shot, but there's a tiny bit of the biotope of this particular small lake in Ibadan, Nigeria. Well, let's see. I kept trying though. Remember, I had to find that African arowana, and I was keen to find it. So I kept throwing my cast net in various areas around this. And this time I didn't come up with the African arowana, but I did come up with this great characin, Epsetis odoe. I think it's a really cool African tetra-like fish, and it's quite a predator. When you look at its face, you can see this is definitely a piscivore. And interestingly, I've done a little bit of research on this particular species of fish, and here's one that we caught there. And when you compare its morphology to this species, this is the squirrel from the Pixar film Ice Age 2, and you can see that there is indeed convergent evolution taking place. Quite obvious. Other really cool fish that we caught here in Ibadan, Nigeria include this great mormyrid, Mormyrius rume. Love that face, don't you? And then, of course, the famous Nile perch, Latis niloticus. Now, having spent a lot of time in Lake Victoria, I always look at Latis or the Nile perch as like the enemy of the people or the enemy of the haplochromines, because it was introduced artificially there and caused, unfortunately, the extirpation of probably at least 100 species of cichlids. But here in West Africa, it's a native fish, and it is endemic to this area, and the other fish have evolved to get along with it. This is a small species, obviously. Other specimens have been pulled from this very lake that are about 5 feet long. I've seen them. Anglers have caught really huge specimens of this, the Nile perch. Okay, there's other hemichromis that can be caught in this area, and this is one of them, Hemichromis elongatus. This is sometimes called the 5-star general. The elongatus is differentiated from the fasciatus by the absence of small black spots. It just has the big black blotches, and you can see it's got some red between the scales or on the edges of the scales. It's a great looking fish, but for those of you who've tried to keep it in captivity, you realize it's really, really feisty and pretty murderous, particularly when it goes into spawning. You need a big tank if you want to keep Hemichromis elongatus, quite similar to the fasciatus. But when you go to the west of Nigeria into Benin, Togo, Ghana, you're going to be much more likely to find fasciatus. It's only starting about here in Ibadan and then going east that you're going to find elongatus, and there is some overlap in their ranges. Here's the elongatus, freshly pulled from the water in a little bit of a photo cuvette. Okay, at the end of this trip here, I was like, we've been finding some cichlids, some barbs, and some characins, but I really want to catch some killifish. So then I realized, okay, I'm not going to be in the big lake anymore. I got to go over here in the weeds. And these pictures actually were taken by a friend of mine who unfortunately and quite dramatically had been kidnapped. An American friend of mine who owns a small farm in Nigeria, he had been kidnapped just about 2.5 days prior to these photos being taken. And it was a horrible, horrible experience where one of his workers was murdered, and he and a young woman were taken into the forest, made to march for many miles without food and water, and eventually negotiations led to their release. He came back to the Agricultural Research Station, and when I saw him and he told me the story, then he asked me what I'm doing. I said I was going to go out and try to catch killifish, and he said, "Great, let me come with you." I was amazed. I thought he'd still be in shock from this terrible experience he went through, but he survived it, and he was ready to go out and help me catch killifish. And he actually took these pictures of me netting this 6-barred panchex, Epiplatus togalensis, a really beautiful fish that, again, we've been able to get back to the States and breed, and it really can be quite handsome when the males have their colors on. All right, remember what I was looking for? Yeah, the African arowana. And question is, where do you find African arowanas? Well, I finally realized where I could find them. And looking out into this swampy area, and then eventually stomping out into the swampy area, I saw a nesting site, and it looked like this. Yes, this is what an African arowana nesting site looks like. And when you look into that nesting site, you can see there's an adult male African arowana that's kind of swimming around in circles and moving the reeds and grasses and mud to create a circular nest. And that's where the female comes in and they spawn, and then the male will guard the fry for a number of weeks, taking good care of them in these type of circular nesting sites in the swamps. And so I realized when you see those circular holes in the swamp, then you know that African arowanas are nearby. Heterodotus niloticus, the African arowana. Here's another place I saw one of these little nesting sites that I was excited about. And in this case, I spotted it and I walked up to it, but then the male very quickly got startled and it sort of jumped out of the nest and swam out into the lake there. And then I realized, okay, let me see if there's anything left there. So I took my dip net that you see there and I dip netted into the nest to see what I could find. And I pulled something out and put it into a little plastic container. And this is what wound up in that plastic container. Quite a few fry. And I think this is just a small portion of the 1,000 or so fry that were in that nest. These guys are pretty hard to take care of, I learned. They're plankton eaters. And of course I returned these ones to the nest. All right. But remember, I still needed to see if I could catch an adult because I really wanted to catch this African arowana. It was nice to catch the fry, but what about a nice adult species? So I kept throwing the cast net into the weeds, and eventually, hooray, I was able to catch the big daddy. Yes, this is the Heterodotus niloticus, and it's an amazing species. It really is a dragonfish, an African arowana, and this is about as big as they get. This is a full-size adult, and as you can see, it's got a great big, beautiful mouth with beautiful lips on it. I wanted to give it a kiss. The thing looks so gorgeous. It was the Angelina Jolie of tropical fish of Nigeria. I love this fish, and after I photographed it, I put it back, of course. This is not something that would be easy to transport out of Africa, so I left it behind, and hopefully it's got chances to spawn and produce more of its beautiful offspring. Okay, I mentioned at the earlier, actually I think Michael mentioned at the earlier, that this presentation was originally designed for the American Cichlid Association. So I realized I really went a little bit off script when I chose the African arowana as my holy grail fish. I really should have chosen a holy grail cichlid. So I said, even after I caught the arowana, I would have to keep seeing if I could catch a holy grail cichlid. And so that's what I kept doing. I kept throwing my net into the pond here, and eventually I was able to pull out a holy grail cichlid. Yes, this is a particularly golden version of Saratharodon galileus, a really gorgeous specimen. And for some reason, the specimens of this species of fish in this particular lake, I think because of the diet or the sunlight or something, they're really more golden than is typical of this galileus. Now, galileus is an interesting name for a fish species because, of course, it refers to Lake Galilee. And this same species of fish is found throughout Africa, but also found in Lake Galilee in Israel. In fact, in Israel, it's called St. Peter's fish because it was on the Sea of Galilee that Jesus and his disciples, including St. Peter, were catching fish. And I actually dug up some old photographs from that era and was able to find this one where Jesus is actually instructing some of his apostles how to catch Saratharodon galileus, and he's you can see he's asking them to be very careful not to damage the fins, because he wants the fish to be in perfect shape. Because not many people know this, but Jesus, our Savior, who I love with all my heart, he was not only our Lord, but also an avid aquarist, and he kept his own fish nicely scaped, I would say here, with a small species of Saratharodon galileus. And he was very good at, of course, keeping fish. He was very good at many things, including saving us. But one of the things, of course, he's most famous for is his ability to breed fish or multiply fish. And this, of course, is well documented in Scripture about his ability to multiply fish like this. He can do it with loaves as well, but I think when he does it with fish, it's particularly great. So that's the end of part one, the Nigerian part of this presentation. And I think I should pause here for a second to see if there's any questions or comments. And then if we have time, we'll flip over and I'll tell you about another part of Africa, Mauritania. But let me pause for now.
Hey, Lawrence.
Yes, Michael.
Lawrence, are you able to hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I hear
so
you.
we had one question, which I think you already answered, which is how large the Heterodotus can grow, and I think you just showed us that. So we had that question. I had a few questions as well, especially about these mormyrids you caught in the Benue River, the Pollymirus isidori. So I had exactly the same experience as you, in that I managed to get a group of these, and they had been misidentified as petrocephalus, unfortunately for me. And of course, I had the exact same experience as you. 10 very nice Pollymirus in the beginning, and one by one, they were just mangled to death, as they're highly territorial fish, and very intolerant of having neighbors. So yeah, unfortunately, I learned exactly the same thing the hard way. Now, what's really interesting to me too, though, is that those petrocephalus, that's one that you don't see often, but they're actually a schooling fish that can be active in the daytime. I think they would make a great biotope subject for a Nigerian biotope if you can get your hands on some. They're like a little tetra version of mormyrids, a little schooling tetra version of mormyrids. So I'm just wondering, have you ever kept the petrocephalus or managed to?
No,
so that's just one observation there.
But it is true, Michael. Isn't it true with
just an interesting note
though,
on the
Michael, with mormyrids, though, you've got a lot more experience than I do. But what I've always learned is like you either have to keep a decent-sized group or a single one. And with most mormyrids, if you try to keep 2, 3, or 4, you wind up with violence. That's been my experience. I don't know if you've had a different experience, or you can give us any more recommendations on how to successfully.
That's largely been my experience as well. Yeah, I mean, that's largely been my experience as well, and that's why I always try to get larger groups of them. But the one I haven't kept petrocephalus, and what I've been seeing and from other keepers, those who've managed to keep them, is they are a little different from other mormyrids in that they naturally seem to school almost all the time, and they don't seem to have a lot of intra-species conflict as strong as other mormyrids do. So the species, those Pollymirus, apparently you can't keep them in a group. Another one I've seen, the Brycinus, you can't keep them in a group either. They absolutely form their little territories and they defend them to the death.
Yep.
So
I've had that experience too.
some of the other species, yeah, you can keep them in big groups. Yeah.
Hmm.
So those were really neat looking fish to see there, especially also to the killifish, some fantastic little pike-like epiplatus species, I think would make really great subjects in Nigerian biotopes. And then you also showed the Brycinus species. There's a number of those that are good for subjects as well for Nigerian biotopes. Did you happen to see any plant life in any of these? Were there Anubias or any other kind of plants in these biotopes that you saw in Nigeria? Any like aquatic plants?
You know, Michael, I'm not that much of a plant guy, so I'm not good at identifying plants, but I am good enough at least to recognize Anubias, because I have so much Anubias in most of my tanks at home, because it's the best African plant to keep, because it's so easy to keep. But to tell you the truth, in all my years in Africa, I have never come across Anubias. So I think I've been in the wrong place or not keeping my eyes open.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting.
So, yeah, I don't think it's not
I
as
mean,
common as you might think.
I think it only occurs in, no, I mean, and this is a very important point, because mostly when I see people making their West African biotopes, they always fill them with Anubias, or it's just a go-to because, hey, it's Anubias. And also even for Congolese biotopes, and it's important to understand these plants only occur in certain habitats. There are loads of habitats and biotopes in West Africa, Central Africa that don't have Anubias, don't have Bulbetus and the classic, or don't have crinum. These are the like classic West and Central African plants that you see. Just because we see them commonly available doesn't mean that they're in all of these biotopes.
Yeah.
Okay, then the other part I wanted to get to was the very beautiful hemichromis that you had. Also, great subjects. I've kept the Hemichromis cristatus from Nigeria, another part of Nigeria. Absolutely gorgeous fish that gets just a burning red with yellow accents especially when it's breeding. But all the hemichromis are fantastic, and the smaller ones will make great subjects as long as you're just careful about the mix with other cichlids and so on. Also, of course, the Chromidotilapia gunteri, beautiful fish. I've bred them over several generations. They're fascinating to watch. They will exist with other fish just as long as, once again, you don't have too small fish like glass catfish or anything like that with them. So yeah, I agree with you that they make great aquarium subjects for Nigerian biotopes. And then what else did we have? You had the Cuptodon, another great fish, and the Heterotus. Do people actually keep these? I mean, I see them monster tanks. Also with the Hespetus odo, I see them in these monster fish tanks, and they're fairly popular among the big fish keepers.
Yeah, that's my experience too. Those are really not fish that we should keep. But you know, those monster fish people are crazy, and they love those big predator type fish. And I think the African arowana is a little bit hard to keep because in the wild it's primarily a plankton eater, so it's a little bit hard to feed when they're young. I've seen people online who find other ways to feed them, and there definitely are people who are successful in keeping that species. But I guess I've never seen one in captivity that's been maybe bigger than, I'd say, 14 inches or so. And this is basically just looking online and people are posting videos. So I've never seen anyone who's kept one as huge as that one that I pulled out of the water there in Benue. But things that are smaller or medium size, I think there are some people who found a way to keep them.
So it could be maybe that their growth is stunted in captivity because of the difficult dietary requirements.
Could be.
I had a question on this man that you are showing right now, what is the source of these scars on this man's face?
A lot of tribes in Africa, they do ritual scarification for beauty reasons. Sometimes it's part of an initiation ceremony from moving from boyhood to manhood. Sometimes it happens shortly after birth, where a tribe will mark their kids. Some people say it's for beauty and just to show their tribal identification. Other people say that if a baby is too
Wow.
good looking, they could get the evil eye, and people could be jealous of a baby that's too good looking. So put a few scars on his or her face, and then they won't be perfect, and therefore they won't be subject to that type of fall. So I think there's a different reason for different tribes, but you see it all the time.
Wow, so this is a ritual thing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I hope it. You know how tattooing really caught on, and then the nose rings, and now the crazy earrings in Europe and the West. I really hope that this is not the next wave where people are going to start going for the scarification, because I think it's best to leave that in Nigeria.
Scarification.
Don't get any ideas.
All right. Well, I mean, to me, that's been very interesting, the section on Nigeria. I myself used to keep a Nigerian biotope. I've been invited to go to Nigeria, and I do hope to visit someday if it ever calms down enough in the area that I want to visit, which is the Delta region. So I'm very hopeful about this. I still think it's a great idea to try and attempt Nigerian biotopes. It's very hard to get photographs and information on these biotopes, even though they are collected in and there are people exporting fish from Nigeria, but yet it's extremely hard to get video, photos, or any information about these biotopes. And so what ends up happening, a lot of the biotopes that are attempted are a lot of guesswork, and it's pretty difficult, in my view, actually also to judge them, because we're not working with a lot of information in these cases. So yeah. I just wanted to get your view on that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would, but it's something we can work on. Because once we're over with this COVID thing, I'm going to start going back to Nigeria once a year. And now that you've got me roped in a little bit more on this biotope aquarium project, I'm more incentivized to pay more attention to the plants and water parameters. And maybe I'll try to do a little bit more underwater photography, so we'll have some more reference points. I mean, Nigeria is a huge country, so we're not going to be able to cover it all. But for a few points that I'm able to visit, I'm going to do a bit better in terms of trying to documenting the biotopes for the sake of the BAP.
Great, and I'll definitely, ask you if I'm ever going to Nigeria. I will ask you for some advice for sure.